Elira Voss had learned, a long time ago, that the safest place in the world was a corner nobody looked at. She kept her eyes down. She kept her voice quiet. She moved through the halls of the Blackthorn estate like a shadow, careful never to be noticed by anyone who mattered. She had lived this way since she was 6 years old, when a distant relative dropped her off at the servants' gate and never came back. Nobody told her why. Nobody told her who her parents were. The head housekeeper gave her a mop, a small room near the kitchens, and a warning. Work hard, stay quiet, and never speak unless spoken to. Elira had followed that warning for 15 years. Now, at 21, she was still following it. The Blackthorn estate belonged to Alpha King Draven Ashcombe, the most powerful wolf shifter in the Northern Territories. 5 years earlier, he had ended a brutal war between rival packs and united them under his rule. People said his eyes could freeze a man's blood. They said he trusted no one, not his advisors, not his guards, and certainly not the servants who cleaned his floors and carried his meals. Elira had seen him only a handful of times, always from a distance, always ducking out of sight before his gaze could land on her. That was the rule she lived by. Stay invisible. Stay safe. On the night everything changed, she was carrying a stack of fresh linens to his private chambers. It was a task she usually avoided, but the housekeeper was short-staffed, and someone had to do it. Elira told herself it would take 2 minutes, in and out. No one would even notice she had been there. She was wrong. As she set the linens down near the window, her sleeve caught on the edge of a wooden chest. She tugged it free too quickly, lost her balance, and knocked over a lit candle. Panic shot through her. She grabbed for it before the flame could touch the carpet, and in doing so, her other sleeve slid up her arm, exposing the mark she had hidden since she was a small child. It was a birthmark, dark and strange, shaped like a crown wrapped in the outline of wolf fangs, surrounded by thin lines that looked almost like letters from a language no one used anymore. Elira had always believed it made her ugly, or worse, cursed. She had worn long sleeves her entire life to hide it, even in the heat of summer. She did not notice that the Alpha King was standing in the doorway until his voice cut through the room. "Where did you get that mark?" Elira spun around, the candle forgotten, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had never heard him speak so close before. His voice was low and hard, but underneath it was something she could not quite name. Shock, maybe, or disbelief. "I was born with it, my lord," she said quickly, pulling her sleeve down. "I am sorry. I did not mean to be seen. I will finish and leave at once." But Draven was already crossing the room. Before she could step back, his hand closed gently but firmly around her wrist, turning her arm so the mark caught the candlelight. His golden eyes, the eyes of a true alpha, studied it with an intensity that made her go still. "This is the Lycaea seal," he said, more to himself than to her. "This cannot be real." Elira had no idea what he was talking about. She only knew that the most feared man in the Northern Territories was holding her wrist like it was made of glass, staring at her birthmark as though it had just answered a question he had been asking for years. "My lord, I don't understand," she said softly. He looked up at her then, and for the first time, she saw something other than coldness in his face. He looked almost afraid. "20 years ago," he said, "the Silverfang pack was destroyed in a single night. They were the oldest royal bloodline among us, older than my own family's line. A rival pack wanted their territory, so they slaughtered nearly everyone inside the Silverfang walls. There were always rumors that one child survived, a daughter, smuggled out before the attack began. No one ever found her. Most people believed she died somewhere in the forest, alone." Elira's mouth went dry. "That has nothing to do with me." "This mark," Draven said, nodding toward her wrist, "was described in the old records as the seal of the Silverfang royal line. It has not been seen in 20 years. Until tonight." The room felt smaller than it had a moment ago. Elira pulled her arm back, wrapping it against her chest as though she could hide the mark all over again. "I'm a servant," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been a servant my whole life. I don't have a family. I don't have a bloodline. Please, my lord, don't say things like that." But it was too late. The old healer of the estate had been summoned to check on a separate matter that same night, and when she passed the open door and glimpsed the mark on Elira's wrist, She gasped so loudly that 2 guards came running. By morning, the story had spread through the entire pack. The servant girl who mopped floors was being called the lost princess of the Silverfang line. Elira wanted to disappear. She wanted to run back to her small room near the kitchens and pretend none of it had happened. But there was no pretending anymore. Pack elders arrived within days, demanding to examine the mark themselves. Some looked at her with awe. Others looked at her the way a person looks at a threat that needs to be removed quickly and quietly. Draven refused to let her vanish back into the shadows, no matter how much she begged him to forget what he had seen. "You don't understand what this means," she told him one evening, when he found her hiding in the laundry room instead of the grand hall where the elders wanted her to appear. "People are looking at me differently now. Some of them want to use me. Some of them look like they want to hurt me. I never asked for any of this." "I know," Draven said quietly. He sat down across from her, an act so unusual for an Alpha King that Elira almost forgot to be afraid. "But hiding will not make it go away. If your bloodline is real, then there are people out there who have spent 20 years hoping you were dead. Now they know you're not. The only way to stay safe is to be strong enough that no one can touch you." "I don't know how to be strong," Elira admitted. "I've spent my whole life trying to be small enough that no one would notice me." Draven's expression softened in a way she had never seen from him before. "Then let me help you become who you were always meant to be." Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Draven assigned personal guards to watch over her, which she resisted at first, insisting she did not need protection. But he was patient. He began seeking her out, not as a lord summoning a servant, but as someone genuinely curious about her. He asked about her childhood, her fears, the wolf she had never been able to shift into. That last question surprised her the most. She told him, quietly, that she had never shifted, not once in her entire life. She had always believed it meant she was weak, broken somehow, unworthy of the wolf blood that should have run through her. Draven shook his head. "That's not weakness. Someone suppressed your wolf. There are old spells that can keep a shifter locked in human form, usually placed by someone trying to hide a child from danger. If your bloodline is what I believe it is, then whoever saved you the night of the massacre likely placed that spell to protect you." For the first time, Elira allowed herself to imagine that her life had not been a mistake or a curse, but the result of someone loving her enough to hide her from a terrible fate. Draven offered to help her find out the truth, but he warned her that breaking a suppression spell could be dangerous, even painful. Elira thought about it for 3 days before she agreed. She was tired of not knowing who she was. She was tired of being afraid of her own reflection. The ritual took place in a quiet clearing outside the estate, away from prying eyes. An old healer chanted words in a language Elira did not recognize, while Draven stood close beside her, his presence steady and calm. When the spell finally broke, pain shot through her body like fire, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. Then something inside her cracked open, gently, like a door that had been locked for 20 years, finally swinging free. Her wolf tore through her for the first time in her life. It was not violent or frightening, as she had always feared it would be. It was powerful, graceful, and unmistakably hers. The healer stumbled backward, staring at her in astonishment. Even Draven, a man who had faced down entire armies without flinching, looked at her as though he was seeing something extraordinary. Word of her transformation spread even faster than the discovery of her mark. She was not only the lost heir of the Silverfang line, she was an alpha in her own right, with power that some elders whispered could rival Draven's own. People who had once dismissed her as a servant girl now bowed when she passed. Others, frightened by what she represented, began plotting quietly in the shadows. Elira noticed the change in Draven too. He no longer treated her as a curiosity or a political problem to be managed. He looked at her the way a person looks at someone they are falling for. Though neither of them said the words out loud, she found herself looking forward to his visits, treasuring the quiet moments they shared away from the elders and their endless demands. But peace never lasts long in a world built on old grudges. 3 weeks after her wolf awakened, the pack held a large gathering to formally welcome dignitaries from neighboring territories. Draven insisted Elira attend, dressed not as a servant, but as the honored guest she now was. She stood nervously beside him, still unused to the silk gown and the weight of the crowd's attention, when she noticed a group of unfamiliar guests moving strangely through the hall. Her instincts, sharpened by her awakened wolf, screamed a warning before her mind fully understood why. She grabbed Draven's arm just as the first attacker lunged from the crowd, a blade hidden beneath his sleeve. Chaos erupted. The guests who had come disguised as diplomats were assassins, sent by the descendants of the pack responsible for destroying the Silverfang line 2 decades earlier. They had learned that the lost heir was alive, and they intended to finish what their ancestors had started. Illyra did not have time to be afraid. Her wolf rose within her, faster and stronger than she had ever felt before. She fought beside Draven, moving with an instinct she did not know she possessed, protecting not only herself but the guards and guests around her. When the last attacker fell, the hall went silent, except for her own ragged breathing. She stood in the wreckage of the gathering, her gown torn, her hands trembling, but her spirit unbroken. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a frightened servant hiding in the shadows. She felt like exactly who she was meant to be. Draven crossed the hall toward her, ignoring the stunned murmurs of the crowd. He did not care that everyone was watching. He knelt in front of her, right there among the broken furniture and scattered glass, and looked up at her with a certainty that silenced the entire room. "You were never meant to serve anyone," he said. "You were meant to rule beside someone as an equal. I am asking you to be that person beside me, not because your bloodline demands it, but because I have never met anyone as strong, as kind, or as worthy as you." Illyra looked down at the man who once terrified an entire territory, now kneeling before her with nothing but honesty in his eyes. She thought of the frightened girl who used to hide her wrist beneath long sleeves, who believed she was destined to disappear quietly into a life no one would remember. That girl was gone now. She reached for his hand and helped him rise, standing beside him rather than beneath him. "Then let's build something worth ruling," she said softly, "together." The pack that had once called her nothing more than a servant now watched as their Alpha King stood hand in hand with the lost heir of the Silverfang line, her ancient seal glowing faintly beneath her sleeve, no longer a secret to be hidden, but a legacy finally reclaimed.